The knock that wouldn't stop. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend. I had booked a small budget hotel in the outskirts of town, hoping for some solitude after a grueling week at work. The hotel wasn't fancy, just a place to rest, recharge, and clear my mind. Room 402, 4th floor, tucked away at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. I checked in late, around 11 p.m. The lobby was almost deserted except for the night clerk, who handed me my key card with a polite nod. I took the elevator up, dragging my small suitcase behind me. The corridor was eerily silent, the kind of silence that made even the faintest sound feel amplified. My room was basic: a bed, a small desk, an outdated television mounted on the wall, and a window with curtains that barely covered the glass. I locked the door, double-checked it out of habit, and settled into bed. The quietness was comforting at first. No distractions, just me and the stillness. Until the knocking started. It was faint at first, 3 soft taps. I froze, listening. Another 3 knocks, steady, measured, deliberate. I glanced at the clock. 3:13 a.m. Who would be knocking at this hour? I got up, hesitated at the door, and peered through the peephole. No one was there. Chalking it up to tiredness, or maybe a prank, I returned to bed. Just as I was drifting off, the knocking returned, louder this time. Not frantic, but persistent. I crept back to the door, my pulse racing. Again, through the peephole, nothing. The hallway was empty, bathed in the dull yellow glow of a flickering light. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Someone was messing with me, or worse. I decided to ignore it, pulled the blanket over myself, and tried to sleep. But the knocking wouldn't stop. It grew louder, more urgent. The sound seemed to seep into the room, vibrating through the thin walls. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I grabbed the room phone, but there was no dial tone. My cell phone had no signal. Panic crept in. I mustered the courage, unlocked the door slightly, and peeked outside. Still nothing. The hallway stretched out empty in both directions. But just as I was about to close the door, a shadow moved at the far end of the hall. Someone was standing there. Too far to make out details, but close enough to know I wasn't imagining it. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They just stood there, shrouded in darkness. I slammed the door shut, heart pounding. I dragged the desk chair to wedge it under the doorknob. Then I heard it again, the knocking, but this time, it wasn't from the door. It was coming from the window. I turned slowly. My breath caught in my throat. My room was on the 4th floor. There shouldn't be anyone outside the window. But there was. A face. Pale, expressionless, with dark, hollow eyes, pressed against the glass. I stumbled back, knocking over the chair. The face didn't move, just stared. I grabbed the lamp, ready to defend myself, but when I blinked, the face was gone. I rushed to the window, pulling the curtains aside. Nothing. No one. Just the empty parking lot below. Impossible. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner, lamp in hand, waiting for morning. When the sun finally rose, I packed my things and left without looking back. At the front desk, I mentioned the strange knocking. The clerk gave me a puzzled look. Room 402? That room's been vacant for months. We don't rent it out anymore. I didn't ask why. I never stayed in that hotel or any hotel like it again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I hear faint knocking. Steady, measured, deliberate. The investigation begins. Weeks passed, but the events of that night haunted me. Sleep became elusive, and even the faintest knock would jolt me awake. The memory of that pale face lingered in my mind. I decided I needed answers. I returned to the hotel, not as a guest, but with the intention of uncovering the truth. The lobby was eerily familiar, and the same night clerk was there. I approached cautiously. "Excuse me," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "Can you tell me why room 402 isn't rented out anymore?" The clerk hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "Why do you ask?" I took a deep breath and recounted my experience. His face grew pale, and he glanced around nervously before leaning in. "There's a story about that room," he whispered. "Years ago, a guest went missing from there. No signs of forced entry, no clues, just gone. The only thing left behind was a single red fingerprint on the window." Chills ran down my spine. Determined to learn more, I visited the local library and dug through old newspapers. I found the article, "Mysterious Disappearance at Local Hotel Room 402." The photo accompanying the article showed a man whose face bore an uncanny resemblance to the figure I had seen. I wasn't imagining it. Confronting the past. Fueled by fear and curiosity, I decided to stay in room 402 one last time. Armed with a flashlight, a recorder, and a camera, I checked in under an alias. The room felt colder, darker than before. At 3:13 a.m., the knocking began. This time, I didn't cower. I grabbed my camera and recorder, documenting every sound, every shadow. I spoke aloud, asking questions, hoping for answers. The knocking grew louder, and suddenly the door creaked open on its own. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, and followed the faint sound of footsteps leading to the stairwell. The air grew colder with each step. I descended to the basement, a place I hadn't explored before. There, hidden behind old furniture, was a small door. Trembling, I pushed it open. Inside was a forgotten room, dusty and dark. On the floor, illuminated by my flashlight, was a message smeared in red. "Help me." I snapped photos, recorded everything, then fled the hotel. When I reviewed the footage later, my blood ran cold. In the background of the videos, standing silently behind me, was the same pale face, watching, waiting. I don't know who or what I encountered that night, but one thing's certain: the knocking never truly stops.